Come on in to Margaret McSweeney's Kitchen for Kitchen Chat, where every week you'll meet chefs, cookbook authors, foodies, gourmets, and just plain people who love to eat. And along with laughter, chat, recipes, and stories about food, you'll sometimes also hear words of inspiration, love, and hope. As Margaret always says, Kitchen Chat is food for the senses and food for the soul. So grab a cup of coffee, put your feet up on a comfy chair, and get ready to spend a little time with Margaret and her friends.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kitchen Chat. This is your host, Margaret McSweeney, and I am truly so delighted you're joining me virtually here in my Chicagoland kitchen. And thank you for keeping in touch via Facebook on Kitchen Chat and on @McSweeney, my Twitter feed, and Instagram, Margaret McSweeney. It's so wonderful to hear from you and hear about your culinary journeys. And thank you so much for joining me on my culinary journey each week. As many of you know, it's a personal walk, and I'm discovering my late father's joy of cooking. My biggest regret in life was not going into the kitchen with him and learning how to cook. And this has just been such an emotional and fun culinary journey to discover that joy and to discover and learn all about food and recipes and cooking techniques. And so thank you. Please keep your questions and encouragement coming. And today I am just beyond delighted and honored to introduce you to someone who truly needs no introduction, Tina Ujlaki, who for 25 years has been with Food and Wine magazine. She is the executive food editor, a James Beard Award winner, just highly acclaimed and a true culinary expert. So Tina, welcome to Kitchen Chat.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Happy to be here. Or there, or everywhere.
Yes, everywhere. Thank you. And for November and December, for this season, kind of the theme we're pursuing here on Kitchen Chat is building traditions for the holidays. And Food and Wine magazine has been part of everyone's tradition, I think, for the holidays. And do you have some really special features coming up for this season?
Of course we do. You know, we get so excited the holidays because, the holidays are November and December are our biggest issues ever, which mean that the food department here gets really excited because we get to do more recipes than we do in any other issue. This year, for example, in our November issue, we have some things, we have one thing that we've never done before. Our editor-in-chief has actually just written a book called Mastering My Mistakes, and she has been building new traditions in her family. These are very, very simple, basic recipes that are maybe of the less ambitious sort. You know, we work with a lot of chefs throughout the year. Especially during the holidays, we try to keep everything as accessible as we possibly can. So we have very, very basic menu from Dana, which is great, which he did with Chef Jonathan Waxman of Barbudo here in New York. He of the chicken fame, so he's turned his expertise to a larger bird. And then we have a great multi-culti Thanksgiving story with Chef Marcus Samuelson.
Yes.
And I say multi-culti all in one person because, of course, he's a Ethiopian-born, Swedish bred.
Yes.
So we have a really, really fantastic Harlem Thanksgiving menu with him.
Delicious.
And then we have a huge celebration of artisans in this country, across the country. Artisans of all sorts. So, usually you think about people who make things, but we've included farmers and fishermen and cheesemakers and butchers. And we've gotten their special recipes for the holidays. So we have some really, really, really fantastic recipes, and we also have some fantastic stories about amazing, inspiring people who are doing really wonderful things with food.
Oh, and that's what it's all about, bringing everything into the kitchen and celebrating food and the stories and creating taste memories, which is so very special, especially around the holidays, and building those traditions. Now, Tina, do you have any special traditions for the holidays with food?
Oh, definitely. Well, I grew up in a Hungarian family.
Yes.
So a very small Hungarian family, like my parents and me. And, well, we never celebrated Thanksgiving. So when I started my own family, I was like, okay, I have a lot to make up for. So we have certain things that we do that are the same every year. They're never exactly the same, but, we always have a turkey. We always hit all of the Thanksgiving ingredients, but sometimes we move them around. So sometimes we always, we have to have pies. My daughter is now in charge of making the pies. When my kids were smaller, I made everything. Now that they're grown, they have their things that they have to make, and it's totally their call whether, I've made my certain pecan pie for I don't know how many years. I mean, I have to admit that most of my recipes either came directly from Food and Wine or were inspired by Food and Wine
Sure.
because, I've had all of the Thanksgivings I've had with my family. I've been working here.
Oh.
So we usually start with a soup, but sometimes we start with a salad. Sometimes we dispense with the first course altogether because it's too many people and too many plates at the table, and we'll just do a host of hors d'oeuvres.
Mm.
So, and we, usually have one that's fish, and then we have things for the fish haters, so we'll have one made with cheese and one that's vegetarian, and, fortunately, I don't have any friends who have very, very serious dietary restrictions, nor
Yes.
family members, so I can sort of make whatever I want. But I basically make all of the traditional things, but I do different things with them every year. Like I was just looking at this cranberry mostarda that we did. That's a nice twist on a cranberry sauce that has mustard seeds in it. And, of course, every chef on the planet is using mustard seeds with abandon this year. This happened to come from a butcher because it's a really wonderful condiment to meat. So I think I'll be making that instead of the cranberry sauce with walnuts that I made last year. And, I don't even remember what I made the year before. So, I look for new ways to treat the ingredients that I make, year after year. I think I might even make some candied bacon as an appetizer because it was so easy to make. You can make it ahead, and it's sweet and it's savory and it's just a little bit different. So that's pretty great.
Oh, how fun! And I just recently interviewed Morgan Murphy, who has the new book "Bacon and Bourbon" out.
Two of my favorite things in the world.
Yes, isn't it? And he's from my hometown in Alabama. It's just such a small world. So we had a fun chat, and I love how because listeners, I subscribe to Food and Wine. I have the digital version, and it's great. It just comes into your inbox. It's just wonderful. And I had a little sneak peek at the November issue, Tina, and I noticed there was a bourbon pecan pie.
There certainly is. And not only is there a bourbon pecan pie, there are 4 iterations of a bourbon pecan pie.
Interesting.
Because some people, everybody makes their standard pecan pie with corn syrup.
Yes.
And we thought we would mix it up a little bit. And we went to the folks at Back in the Day Bakery and had them create, I guess this is what they do. Anyway, they do a basic pecan pie, and then you can alter or swap out the sugar. So we did a traditional one. We did it with sorghum syrup. We did a recipe with cane syrup. We did one with dark corn syrup to give it a little more, a deeper flavor than light corn syrup, and one with honey. So, that was very interesting. We did them all at the same time so we could taste them all against each other. It's all the same recipe, and you can just swap out one syrup for another if you want to change your game a little bit, but not so much that you're fussing with tradition.
Right, and you're not changing the taste. So I'm curious, how did the taste test come out with those 4 options?
Well, to my taste, the honey was a little too intense. But maybe I'm not as much of a honey lover as I thought I was. We love the sorghum. I didn't grow up with sorghum, so that's sort of new to me. It has a slight tang to it. Cane syrup, I also didn't grow up with. So, one of the great things here is you learn something every day. really get to have these new experiences all the time. And I had never worked with dark corn syrup either, so it definitely has a deeper flavor than light corn syrup. But they were all, every single one of them was great in its own right.
Oh, and that I'm already tasting Thanksgiving. Having grown up in the South, pecan pie was always a staple on the table.
And what did you make it with? Or what did your family make it with?
And that's the thing. I wish I'd known, because my dad was always in there cooking and I did not.
Oh.
I know. I remember, I think there was that, maybe it was sorghum. I don't know. I don't know, but I always remember my dad. I have such fond memories of that, because I'd kind of be in and out of the kitchen. I'd help set the table and all that, of course, with Thanksgiving. And he'd always be putting so many different ingredients in the dressing. He had so much fun making the cornbread in the cast iron skillet. I kind of remember that. And then
that's what I do.
Oh, wow.
I always make. That's the one thing that it can change, because I can make more than one stuffing or dressing. Some years I've made 2 or 3, and one was a bread pudding and one was cornbread and one was a standard bread one. But I always have to make the cornbread one, otherwise my family would mutiny.
And I remember one year going into the kitchen, setting the table, and he was putting oysters in the dressing.
Well, that's very Southern and traditional.
Yeah, so that was kind of a fun little, you just brought back those little memories. So thank you, Tina. That's fun to see. And another very unique dish I noticed that you're featuring, and it also has some special meaning to me, is the red cabbage.
So when we were looking for farmers to feature, I was like, oh, you know what? I went to this great restaurant, and, we always love families, especially during Thanksgiving, but we love families all the time. And, they have this wonderful, wonderful farm. We actually have another farmer who's my favorite farmer at the farmer's market in, here in New York City, in Union Square, and we got to feature her recipes too. But, they did this very, very simple slaw that is perfect for Thanksgiving, actually, because with all the cooked things that you end up having, it's always nice on your plate to have something, or maybe on a side plate if it's juicy, to have something that's crunchy and that's refreshing and that's not cooked. And also, that's sort of vibrant red and, can sort of match the color of a cranberry.
Right. Because it's intriguing, Tina, because my husband is half Irish and half Danish, and my mother-in-law was first generation Danish, and here in the Chicago area, and every holiday meal would include her cooked red cabbage. It was really interesting.
I grew up in a Hungarian family, so every time we had pork, every time we had duck, we had cooked red cabbage, basically cooked with red wine and a little vinegar.
Yes.
So it doesn't look vibrant like this. It gets that deep red purple almost color to it. And it has a really almost silky texture, whereas, this is really, really crispy. It really tastes like a slaw.
Interesting. Okay.
One of the nice things about this is it takes, literally minutes to put together, which it's always nice to have things that take minutes to put together when you're cooking Thanksgiving. I think that's one of the hardest things, actually, for cooks to remember. When you're planning a holiday meal, there are so many things to remember. First and most important thing is don't, bite off more than you can chew, and remember that there are other meals that people will be eating during the year. So you don't have to pack every single thing into Thanksgiving dinner. But it's always nice to have things that are very quick to prepare and things that you can prepare ahead. And, you always have to think about how much oven space you have and how much stove space you have so that you can balance all of your tasks.
Right.
So that you don't find at the last minute you have 9 things that have to go in the oven and have to be reheated simultaneously.
Exactly. And the challenge is always finding that extra space in the refrigerator to put everything into. That is so true. Now, in terms of the turkey, it was interesting. I just had a chat with Russ Parsons, and he has a special recipe for this brining the turkey. And I was just wondering if you have a special way to brine your turkey or how you kind of prep it for Thanksgiving.
Well, you know what, I am very, very basic about the turkey because I feel like the turkey is just sort of there as the centerpiece. You know, you have to have it on your plate because it's what you eat everything else with.
Right.
So I'm lazy when it comes to the turkey. I usually put pancetta under the skin and a whole bunch of herbs and onions inside, and you know, sometimes I put bacon on the outside instead of the pancetta, and then I just roast it. And I make my gravy ahead, so I don't have to worry about taking the turkey out of the pan and using the drippings. I make my gravy sometimes a week ahead. You know, so I'll make stock and I'll brown bones and make stock and cook it all the way down and then make a gravy, and sometimes I even put it in the freezer if I'm really, really, really organized. But last year, I think we did, it was great because we cooked a turkey 4 ways. We deep fried a turkey. We dry brined it, which is rubbing it with salt and aromatics and letting it sit overnight. Or sometimes for 2 days, just to season the meat really, really well.
Yes.
Wet brining is awesome because you're pretty much guaranteed a juicy bird, even if you tend to overcook it. And this very second, I can't remember what the last thing we did was, but I just heard somebody, my boss's friend, mentioned that he freezes the turkey breast. Or somehow he freezes the turkey breast side down so that the breast gets really, really cold, so that when you put the turkey in the oven, you know, the legs basically have a little bit of a head start, since there's always the challenge of roasting the legs and roasting the breast, and they don't cook in the same amount of time.
Right.
I usually roast them separately, or, you know, together, but separately, because I never bring the turkey to the table to show it to everybody and then take it back in the kitchen and carve it. You know, I usually just carve it and put it on a platter so nobody sees that they cook separately, and that way I can cook everything at the same time.
That is a great idea. That's a wonderful tip to take away. You don't have to do it all together. Now, just a quick question. Do you use an electric carver or a carving knife?
I just use a knife. I have an electric slicer that my mother gave me. I'm a little afraid of it. It's a lot of noise, and it goes really fast, and it feels like a chainsaw.
Yes.
And, right. No, I just use a nice sharp knife.
That is wonderful. Now, about the fried turkey, I've never fried a turkey. What was that experience like? And was it a little scary? Does the grease pop out, or how does that work?
Well, the grease, as long as your turkey is dry when it goes in, and we, I know a lot of people who do that outside. We don't have outside here, and please don't tell our building inspectors that we did this. But we actually did it inside, and it just so happened that a new product came out last year exactly in time. You know, we're cooking turkey in July, basically, is when we're working on our November issue. Sometimes it's June, sometimes it's August, but it's definitely the middle of the summer. But a new deep fryer came out that was specifically designed for turkey. So I was like, oh, well, we'll try out the new product, and we can also fry our turkey. So we actually had a countertop turkey deep fryer that we got to fry it in.
Wow.
So it wasn't frightening at all. And I think it revolved, so that the turkey was really, really beautifully cooked. I think it was actually everybody's favorite turkey.
That sounds delicious. What fun. It sounds like such a fun place to work, Tina.
This is a pretty great place to be, I have to say.
Oh, my goodness. And I
have to say. But, you know, on our website, I was just looking, and I couldn't believe it. We have 185 turkey recipes. No, that was probably not all for a whole turkey, but there's too much to choose from sometimes. It's really amazing.
And great ideas for the leftovers, because you're always like, what do I do with all of this turkey? So that's a great resource for what to do after Thanksgiving with all the turkey. And I love how Food and Wine has 17,000 recipes. Is that correct?
I think that's what I was asking them for. Something else I was asking and they said that there's 17,000 recipes, about 17,000 recipes on our website.
Wow.
Is what I was told. We have a lot more because they just haven't, I think it only goes back to 1998. So I've been here for many years when, and those recipes aren't exactly represented online, but we have books that have them, and we have, of course, we have all our old magazines here.
Exactly.
On the shelf. So
lots
of amazing stuff to choose from. It's actually now there's so many recipes everywhere you look that it's, I can see how it would be a little bit overwhelming and intimidating for a new cook.
Yes.
To be looking around for something, and I can see why they would, instantly gravitate towards the easiest looking things there are. But,
right.
I like to think that our recipes are the best, of course.
Oh, of course.
So I would encourage anybody to come our way. And fortunately, if you look for recipes on our website, there's there are little selects on the side, and you can look for things that are fast or done in under 45 minutes. That are easy.
That's great.
And there are thousands and thousands of those as well. We also, I should just mention that we we have a significant book program that we do here, and we just came out with an awesome book. I just got it 2 days ago, called Chef's Easy Weeknight Dinners.
Oh.
And every recipe fits on one page and doesn't take up the page.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the recipes are 2 or 3 steps, maybe some are 4. And, there's an image of the recipe opposite the recipe. So, this was a very, very exciting book for us to do because it's, a lot of people think, oh, chef's recipes are going to be so complicated. And we pride ourselves on making chef's recipes accessible since we work with so many chefs. But
yes.
this book was...
And I love, Tina, how you have the chef in residence. And listeners, there's a fun video on the website which features the different chefs in residence. You have them, blending at the cubicle and all of that. It's such a fun...
Oh, when they did the takeover of our office.
Yes. That is great. But you really do work, with these wonderful chefs as well and collaborating on books and projects and articles, which is terrific.
Well, we're very lucky because they always have to create. They always have to seek out new ingredients. They always have to find new techniques and clever ways with things that, we use all the time. So we are very, very fortunate to be there at their sleeves and, on their coattails. And so, that's why, we really, really learn every single day.
Uh-huh.
And it makes us all smarter food people and better cooks as well. So it keeps it really interesting and exciting because we're always learning.
That is great. And speaking of chefs and those in the culinary field, who would you say has really inspired and influenced you the most in your career?
I'd have to start with my mentor, who's a woman named Ann Willen. Really everything a lot of what I know, I owe to Anne because I was a work-study student at La Varenne many, many years ago, and then I had the opportunity to work at the school, and I had the opportunity to work on cookbooks with Anne, so I learned about recipes, and I learned about recipe writing and editing and everything about recipes and cookbooks. Way back when, there weren't 3,500 cookbooks published in a year, and there weren't millions of recipes popping up on the internet every 2 seconds. So, I just had an amazing, amazing education thanks to her and, very, very, very serious classical French training. So she would be number one. I had the great fortune I got to work with Julia Child and Marcella Hassan and Jacques Pepin and Paula Wolfert very, very, very closely for many years, doing a column with the 4 of them in rotation. And they were all incredibly, incredibly inspiring, mainly, I would say, in terms of sort of work ethic and dedication to craft. And, like Marcella would test her recipes 6, 7, 8 times.
Wow.
Until she felt that they were, perfected to the point where she could actually put them in a book. I think there are people who publish books now who maybe don't test their recipes, or maybe they don't test every single one, or, it's easy to guess, or deadlines are, maybe deadlines are shorter or whatever. But, there was, none of them ever cut any corners in terms of, getting it right. And that was very, very, very inspiring. And they also never missed a deadline, which is amazing.
Yes.
And, I learned, just so much from each one of them. So I would say that's my posse of 5, if I could only pick 5.
And what wonderful picks. And it was such a delight to have Anne Willen on Kitchen Chat and hear the Loverend stories. Great. Oh, just so lovely. And with Julia Child, oh my goodness, what special memory, what is your most treasured memory with Julia Child?
Oh, well, let's see. I have a few, but I guess the one I always think about and that gives me just the hugest chuckle, I cooked in her kitchen with her, and, there's nothing more terrifying than asking Julia to make her dinner. Like, well, could you just make a little dinner for us? And I was like, okay, what would you like me to do? And she said, just roast a chicken. Well, roasting a chicken, Jacques Pepin would say that, he when he was testing out cooks, he would have them roast a chicken and make a salad with vinaigrette. As easy as roasting a chicken is, it can be absolutely terrifying and intimidating. So that's, one thing I think about. And another is sometimes when we would go up and shoot in Julia's house, I would stay over at her house. And being woken up by Julia Child was quite an experience. Because she had her booming voice, and, she's very tall, and to have her leaning over the bed, waking you up was, I think about that often. Very, very, very amusing and thrilling, and, those are probably 2 of my favorite Julia things. They don't directly relate to food. And I guess the third one would be also doesn't relate to food, but they were busy shooting downstairs, and I think she was trying to get rid of me for a few minutes, and she told me to go upstairs into one of the rooms in their house where they kept all of Paul's photographs. And I just sat on the bed for what must have been an hour and a half and just went through boxes and boxes of the most amazing photographs I've ever seen in my life. So that was a huge treat.
Oh, how special. And did she ever cook for you?
No. I mean, she cooked when, if we were photographing a story.
Right,
it was her food but there were food stylists there and other people helping. So she actually did. I've never had her, actually cook for me, no.
Oh,
and I've eaten with her, but no,
I've
eaten at her kitchen table. That chicken, which I guess it was okay because we continued to work together for many years after that. So I must have passed the test. But
oh, how special! And did she ever talk about any special traditions that she had for the holidays?
Well, yes, but it's not food related. But I'll tell you anyway.
Sure.
We actually got to do a story on it many years ago. She and Paul were not Christmas card senders, but they would send Valentine cards.
Oh.
And they would make a Valentine card with the 2 of them, something to do with the 2 of them. I think there are a couple of them in her book that they actually photographed. And they were usually very humorous, but sometimes it was sort of I remember one that was the 2 of them in a bathtub, on either end of a bathtub, and, it had some very, very sweet saying, and, sometimes, they were just decorated, but those Valentine cards were very, very adorable.
Oh,
I know they've been published elsewhere as well, but, that's the only tradition. I'm sure when she celebrated with her family, even though she didn't have kids, she had family that she was very, very close to.
Right.
So I'm sure she celebrated with them.
Oh.
I think we did a Christmas dinner at her house many, many years ago that, might have been the time she came, when I was sleeping there when she came to wake me up.
How fun.
But, it was for a story, so, it wasn't as if it was a real dinner that she was having that we were photographing.
Oh, but how special. What treasured moments with Julia. That is just so neat. Thank you for sharing that. And Tina, I want to make sure I get to the listeners' questions. They have been just emailing, texting, all of that. Justin says, what do you think about the growth of canning with high-end restaurants doing their own canning? And he also asks, is braising the next big culinary thing in cooking?
Oh, well, those are two very good questions. Let's see. Well, I think it's awesome if restaurants are preserving the harvest and canning and pickling. I think it's fantastic, and I'm sure they're using great peak season fruit or vegetables, and I guess you'd can beets. So, I think that's awesome. Of course, chefs everywhere are making their own condiments. It's a way of, putting their own stamp on what they're doing. So, it's great to have a larder that you can draw from. That's a larder that, is bespoke, that, you basically created.
Yeah.
Braising, I think braising should be in everybody's repertoire because it's easy, and low and slow takes care of itself. I don't know. I think there are so many of the sort of international dishes from around the world that are braised, and it, is basically the one and only, well, I would say the best way to cook all of the slow cooking tougher cuts of meat or bonier cuts of meat. So, braising basically opens the world to getting tenderness and a huge amount of flavor and incredible sauces that, you certainly don't get if you are roasting or cooking by any other high heat method. And a great benefit in restaurants anyway, to braising is you can braise things in advance, so it takes the pressure off of all of the a la minute cooking that they also have to do.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you, Justin. And Sharon, who is actually the co-president of Chicago Gourmets, asks, what is the next emerging growth area geographically for boutique wines?
For great value in French wine, look to wines from the Loire. And I would also say that in our November issue, since we were just talking about it,
yes,
we have a really fun wine map of new producers in the U.S. So they're standout bottles from the New America. We did this thing called the Great American Wine Challenge. So they're wines from once unpromising states like Arizona, New York, Texas, and Virginia.
Wow.
That we celebrate.
Yes.
So, those are fun. And I believe our entire November issue is online already.
Great.
I believe. I might be wrong, but I know it's out in the world.
Terrific. And Sharon also asked, do you see farm to table as a trend or a long-term lifestyle choice for both dining in and out?
Extremely long. I don't think you can put the genie back in the bottle.
Okay.
I think we will be, hopefully, I can't imagine going backwards. The thing we always say to chefs, how they try to distinguish themselves, and they're trying to pitch us a story, and they're like, well, we're farm to table. And we're like, honey, everybody is farm to table now. Everybody who has the good fortune of having a farm nearby.
Right.
It's not as if there aren't, more food deserts than we would like to recognize, and it's not as if there isn't, hunger in every city and, right outside your front door.
Right.
But as far as, looking to buy produce as close to the source as possible and celebrating produce as close to the source as possible, I can't imagine we would ever, I hope that's a lifetime for perpetuity choice.
Right.
On all of our parts.
Exactly.
I think farmers are the new rock stars. So,
yeah, I love
farmers and artisans, or at least as far as we're concerned, they are.
I love that.
And,
farmers are the new rock stars. I love that. They are. They are, along with the chefs, of course, but yes.
We're so happy, like even in our food artisan story, to be able to celebrate farmers, which,
yes.
we don't get to do that often, but, I think they, in farmers markets, they've all sort of raised the quality. I think they've raised our quality of life, period.
Yeah.
Not just made our food better and our cooking better and hopefully our health better, but I think, they've made our lives better. When I was growing up, salmon was still seasonal, but we didn't have, if I go to Whole Foods, maybe not at my standard grocery store, but if I go down the aisle at Whole Foods, I can point out to my daughter all the things we didn't have when I was growing up. And it wasn't that long ago.
Exactly.
So it just expanded. Not the air, having things flown in and whatever else hasn't expanded it. But
right.
I think, given the choice, at least for the majority of our constituency, if given the choice of a carrot that was flown in from California or a carrot that was grown in your neighbor's backyard, I would be loath to find the person who would pick the carrot that was flown in from California.
Exactly.
So yes, I think it's here to stay.
Here to stay. Yay. That is great news. Elaine asked, what are your 2 to 3 go-to spices that she should add in her own cooking?
Unfortunately, it all depends on, sort of what you like. I cook with a lot of chili, but I say chili is like a big, big family. So that can be anything from paprika and crushed red pepper to Aleppo pepper or pimenton, either hot pimenton, which is a smoked Spanish paprika, smoky Spanish paprika, or, and then there are all the, the Mexican peppers, whether it's ancho or chipotle, or all the others. It's just a flavor. Maybe it's because I'm Hungarian. It all started with paprika.
Yes.
But, that whole range of peppers, there's a French pepper that's very popular now called piment d'Espelette. It's very expensive. It's a little bit spicy. It comes from the Basque Country, but there are all those, wonderful Turkish and Middle Eastern peppers, and I like harissa, but that's not a spice. So that would be one. Again, I really like cumin, so I cook with quite a bit of cumin. And then, I cook with herbs. Like I cook with a lot of fresh herbs. It's not really a spice. I guess my third spice would be salt and pepper.
Salt and pepper.
I think you actually can't cook without salt and pepper.
Now, what kind of salt? Because there seem to be so many types of salt these days, the Himalayan or the kosher or the sea salt. What do you like to use?
Yeah, well, we did a story recently on salt that I believe hasn't run yet, and we got to taste so many salts. So now I'm fallen in love with smoked salt.
Oh. Because
it just has a mild, smoky flavor. I love the one like from the Maine Sea Salt Company. But they're, I think almost every state by now, not every state, but most coastal states, if not all coastal states, are making their own salt. So there's so much American salt happening now.
Wow.
But, I love Fleur de Sel from France. I love, I use kosher salt. I usually have a big, big box of kosher salt because sometimes I bake fish in it. Sometimes I roast vegetables in it. So fortunately it's not very expensive. It comes in a big box and it's a clean tasting salt. The one salt I hardly ever use anymore is fine table salt. I just find that I don't use it, which is really unfortunate because I have some very nice salt shakers and I can't use them.
Oh, goodness. So, yeah, there's so many variations of salt for sure. One thing that Chicago is definitely celebrating, Tina, is the fact that the James Beard Awards are going to be held here in 2015, which we're just so excited.
Well, we're excited too because it means we get to come to Chicago.
Yes, and I can't wait to see you in Chicago and welcoming you here. But that prompted the question for Nina, who is very curious to hear your thoughts about how Chicago compares to New York City and Las Vegas and Miami in regards to the dining. Do you feel that Chicago has really become more visible in the culinary world and even more respected recently?
Oh, absolutely. For we myopic New Yorkers, Chicago is right there at the top. You have so many awesome chefs.
Yes.
You have such a wide variety of styles. I've had the good fortune to eat in Chicago a few times, and it's amazing.
Yes.
I think I don't think of. As far as I'm concerned, Chicago is on par with any other top dining destination in the United States.
Yes, and
Absolutely.
Thank you for recognizing that. That's so exciing to hear.
Absolutely. We recognize that, I think, in every single issue that we publish.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, we have that really counterintuitive story with Grant Achatz in our November issue, where he is wearing a nice little, a girly apron, I have to say. It's turquoise and it has flowers on it.
Aww.
And he's making recipes using a slow cooker.
Oh, fun. That would be a
there
fun
you have
article.
it. But
yes.
really hardly an issue. I don't think an issue goes by when we don't feature somebody who we are just mad about from Chicago.
Oh, good. Well, it's going to be fun. And I know it's going to be different to have the James Beard Awards here in Chicago versus New York. But we're just so excited in Chicagoland to be hosting that. So this will be really fun. And then another question came in from Chef Jamie Larita, who is living in Chicago. And he was just wondering what you think about the future of the competitive food shows and cooking. To him, it's all about eating and not competing. And he was just wondering what you see as the outlook for that and what your thoughts were.
I agree with him that it is about eating and sharing table with people and celebrating being at the table. I think all those competition shows are, they're entertainment.
Yes.
People, I think people watch them for the entertainment value, just like they would watch any other, competition. I don't watch a lot of television, so I can't, draw perfect analogies, but, I think it's entertainment value. I think if you can learn something at the same time while you're being entertained, it's awesome. But I think, even just, it's entertainment. It just happens to have, be food related. I've seen a couple of cooking shows that were just, absolutely beyond ridiculous. But, I think it's just, it's about entertainment.
Yes.
It's funny because, I didn't grow up watching the Food Network, but I've talked to a lot of people who, said when they were growing up that the television was always on and it was always turned to the Food Channel. So they just grew up around food.
Right.
That's a new concept to me.
Yes.
But
yes.
I'll just go back to Julia for a second, and how forward thinking she always was. I remember we just happened to be doing a shoot at her house when the people who were starting the Food Network came to ask her what they thought of her idea what she thought of the idea of a 24-hour food channel. And, she just thought it was the most amazing idea. She thought it was going to be fantastic. She thought it would be just wonderful. And if it could happen in her lifetime, she would just, be thrilled. And then they asked me, and I was like, oh, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. I can't imagine people being, I can't imagine there being enough of a viewing public. So, what do I know? But it was, that was another thing about Julia was, she was always looking ahead. and always just thinking that there was, so much more to happen in this, industry, and so many more people to get excited about cooking, who hadn't been as enthusiastic about it as they could have been or should have been. So anyway, you know what? If it brings some aspect of food or cooking into somebody's life, or if it ignites a little bit of the spark, then it's great. I guess maybe we can't judge how you get there.
Right.
Right. It's the fact that you get there. So
yes, and it's
but the competition is just it's for fun. I'm not really into competition, so just personally. So
right.
But I know that from from online promotions we've done, and from the things we do in Aspen, I know at our Aspen Food and Wine Festival that we host every summer. I know we do a Ready, Set, Cook, which is an old show by now, or we used to do a Ready, Set, Cook, and that was always one of the most popular events where, there's a competition and, you can see whether, Jacques Pepin, beats Thomas Keller or something like that. But, it's more for the entertainment value, I think, than for anything else.
Well, this is I've just learned so much through this kitchen chat, Tina. I've had so much fun with you, and I'm so excited about the great resource that Food and Wine Magazine has, both online and in print, and all the great events that you're sponsoring. I saw something about a Barbados event coming up. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, we do that. I don't even know, I probably misquote it, but I think there are 25 of them that we are involved in around the country, with Aspen being the big kahuna, and I believe Pebble Beach right behind.
Oh, well, that is just so much fun. And listeners, I'm going to make sure I have a link to Food and Wine so you can get the online resource, and you can check into subscribing online or in print. Also, to follow Tina, you are on Twitter and Instagram. Is that right, Tina?
Yeah, just at Tina Ujlaki.
That's great. And so we'll also put...
I was just going to say, apropos Instagram, we have this Instagram campaign that we're doing, which is that anybody can participate in. You should take your fall pictures, photographs, anything that says fall. It can be food. It doesn't have to be food. And if you tag them, #ThisIsFall, our online team will be picking winners to be featured on the Food and Wine feed.
How fun. So #ThisIsFall. I can't wait to see some of the photos submitted. And thank you so much, Tina, for sharing about how we can create our own traditions at home with the holiday season and bringing those to the table. And thanks for all that you do at Food and Wine, and all that you do to promote cooking and the joy of cooking. You truly bring that to the table, Tina, and I'm just so honored and delighted to have you on Kitchen Chat.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, that's what we're all about. We just want everybody to get in the kitchen and have a good time, and, share lovely meals with their friends and their family, and, just to come together. Especially at this time of year, but really all year long.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, listeners, for joining me once again here in my kitchen. It's so great to connect with you. And during this busy time, this busy season of the year, remember to take a moment and savor the day.
Thanks for joining Margaret for Kitchen Chat today. Margaret would be so excited for you to drop by and visit with her at kitchenchat.info, where you'll enjoy podcasts, blogs, recipes, tips from chefs, and even great giveaways. She invites you to share your recipes and kitchen stories too. As Margaret always says, savor the day.